May 1945, the war ends and the Luftwaffe collapses overnight. Across Europe, thousands of German aircraft sit abandoned. From classic fighters to cutting-edge jets and unfinished prototypes, the Allies suddenly control technology years ahead of its time, and a silent race begins to capture, study, or destroy everything they find. Before we go deeper into how this decision changed the course of aviation history forever, make sure to subscribe for more history that actually happened. In early May 1945, as Germany surrendered, the Luftwaffe had effectively ceased to function. Aircraft stood abandoned on airfields from Norway to Austria, some intact, others stripped for parts or damaged by bombing. Fuel shortages, scattered command structures, and destroyed infrastructure had grounded many units for weeks. By the time the capitulation took effect on May 8th, thousands of aircraft remained where they were, silent evidence of a force that had once dominated the skies over Europe. The question was no longer how these machines would be used, but what would become of them. The pre-war vision that had created this force began more than a decade earlier. In 1935, when Hitler publicly revealed the existence of the Luftwaffe in defiance of the Versailles Treaty, German strategists envisioned an air force that would serve as the spearhead of rapid, coordinated warfare. Doctrine emphasized tactical air support, close cooperation with ground forces, and the destruction of enemy air power before it could organize resistance. This philosophy shaped every aircraft design that followed. Fighters were built for agility and firepower in short-range engagements. Bombers were designed for tactical strikes rather than strategic bombardment. Transport aircraft enabled airborne operations. The Luftwaffe was not merely an independent service, but an integrated component of a larger military machine. By 1939, this vision had produced one of the most technologically advanced air forces in the world. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 combined speed with maneuverability. The Focke-Wulf FW 190 offered rugged reliability and devastating firepower. The Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber terrorized ground forces with precision attacks. Twin-engine bombers like the Heinkel He-111 and Dornier Do-17 supported ground offensives across Poland, France, and the Low Countries. In the early years of the war, the Luftwaffe's technical superiority and tactical coordination overwhelmed opposing air forces. But the doctrine that had enabled rapid victories in short campaigns would prove inadequate for a prolonged multi-front war of attrition. As the conflict expanded, German engineers faced mounting pressure to develop aircraft that could counter Allied advances in speed, range, and payload. By 1943, the first jet-powered fighter, the Messerschmitt Me 262, entered testing. Its twin Jumo Aero 4 turbojet engines gave it a top speed of over 540 miles per hour, nearly 100 miles per hour, faster than any Allied fighter then in service. The Arado R-234 jet bomber followed, capable of reconnaissance and bombing missions at speeds that made interception nearly impossible. Yet these technical achievements came at a cost. Jet engines required rare materials, precision manufacturing, and constant maintenance. Production remained limited. Fuel shortages worsened. Allied bombing campaigns destroyed factories, transportation networks, and training facilities. By the war's final months, many advanced aircraft existed only as prototypes or sat grounded for lack of fuel. Across northern Germany, key sites such as Flensburg and Lübeck held large numbers of grounded aircraft, some intact, others damaged or unfinished. In Prague, hangars were filled with Messerschmitts, Heinkels, and late-war prototypes. At Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's main testing center, Allied investigators found experimental airframes, wind tunnel models, and technical documents that revealed the scope of Germany's jet and rocket research. The variety of surviving aircraft surprised many Allied officers. Alongside classic types like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and Focke-Wulf FBU 190, they found advanced innovations such as the Arado R-234 jet bomber the Heinkel He 162 lightweight jet fighter, and the remains of projects like the Junkers Ju 287 forward-swept wing bomber. Transport and reconnaissance aircraft, including the Junkers Ju-52 and Heinkel He 111, were scattered across airfields as well. Many units had simply run out of fuel in the war's final weeks, leaving machines parked and untouched. By the time the fighting ended, the Luftwaffe's administrative structure had collapsed. Commanders surrendered to whichever Allied forces they encountered, and ground crews often abandoned posts without orders. Aircraft maintenance records, fuel depots, and spare parts stores were incomplete or destroyed. The Allied Control Commission quickly established strict rules. All German aircraft were grounded, and no German pilot could fly without direct Allied authorization. These measures aimed to prevent unauthorized flights, escape attempts, or the movement of senior officials. A debate soon emerged within Allied commands about what should be preserved and what should be destroyed. Some officers argued that German aircraft posed a risk if left intact, while others saw their potential for research. What is clear is that from the first days after the surrender, the fate of the Luftwaffe's planes became a matter of intelligence, logistics, and political calculation. As soon as Germany surrendered, the Allies began large-scale recovery programs to seize the Luftwaffe's most advanced aircraft. The United States moved first. On May 9, 1945, a day after the formal capitulation, American intelligence teams launched Operation Lusty, short for Luftwaffe Secret Technology. Led by Colonel Harold E. Watson, a former Wright field test pilot, these teams spread across Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. Their mission was clear: locate advanced aircraft, secure technical documents, and transport selected machines back to America for testing. The operation required coordination between intelligence officers, combat engineers, and test pilots. Aircraft had to be identified, evaluated for condition, and prepared for transport, all while navigating bombed-out infrastructure and competing with other Allied collection efforts. At Lechfeld in Germany, American forces secured several intact Messerschmitt Me 262 jets. At Grove Airfield in Denmark, they found Arado jet bombers and a mix of late-war prototypes. Aircraft deemed valuable were flown or dismantled for shipment to the Wright Field Testing Center in Ohio. Others went to Freeman Field in Indiana, where evaluation units cataloged equipment, engines, and design features. Pilots from the Watson's Whizzers flight group test flew captured jets under controlled conditions. Their reports shaped early American understanding of swept wings, jet propulsion, and high-speed aerodynamics. Test pilots discovered that the Me-262's speed advantage came with challenges. Its engines were temperamental, requiring careful throttle management to avoid flameouts. Its high landing speed demanded longer runways and experienced pilots. Yet the aircraft's performance convinced American engineers that jet propulsion represented the future of military aviation. The British launched a parallel effort known as Operation Surgeon. Unlike the Americans, who focused on capturing physical aircraft, the British were equally interested in the engineers, scientists, and technicians who built them. Teams from the Royal Aircraft Establishment moved into airfields at Vosburg, Schleswig, Husum, and Rechlin, interviewing surviving personnel and gathering documents. Selected experts were transferred to British facilities for post-war work. At RAF Farnborough, test pilots flew captured aircraft, including the Me-262, to better understand its strengths and weaknesses. The British were particularly interested in the He-162, whose lightweight design offered lessons for future trainers and interceptors. The aircraft had been designed for rapid production using non-strategic materials, with wooden wings and simplified controls intended to allow less experienced pilots to operate it. British engineers studied these design compromises, weighing the trade-offs between performance and manufacturability. The Soviet Union also moved quickly. Their trophy brigades seized factories and airfields across Saxony, Thuringia, Silesia, and Czechoslovakia. Major production centers such as the Avia Works in Prague and the Bf-109 assembly lines in Moravia fell under Soviet control. Aircraft were shipped east by rail along with tooling equipment and engineers. At air bases near Moscow and Leningrad, Soviet pilots and designers examined the Me-262 and R-234, integrating their findings into early jet projects. The Soviets were systematic in their collection efforts, cataloging not only aircraft but entire production facilities, design bureaus, and research laboratories. Engineers who had worked on German jet programs were offered employment or faced compulsory relocation. The knowledge acquired through these programs accelerated Soviet jet development, contributing to aircraft designs that would appear in the following decade. Competition soon emerged among the Allies. Each power wanted access to the rarest aircraft, especially prototypes that existed in small numbers. There were disagreements over which side had the right to certain machines, particularly at sites in central Germany where American and Soviet forces arrived only days apart. The Allied Control Council attempted to coordinate collection efforts, but tensions reflecting early Cold War divisions were already visible. German personnel played an important role in these programs. Former pilots, mechanics, and engineers answered technical questions, sometimes under supervision and sometimes as part of temporary employment agreements. Their explanations helped Allied teams operate complex systems such as the Jumo Euro-4 jet engine, the WW2, and advanced navigation equipment. The Allies documented everything: photographs, blueprints, flight manuals, and test reports, before deciding which aircraft to keep and which to destroy. By late 1946, the major collection efforts were complete. Dozens of Luftwaffe aircraft had been shipped to the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union for testing. These programs shaped early jet development and set the stage for the next phase, the destruction of everything that remained. By late 1945, the Allied Control Council ruled that Germany could not retain any military aircraft. The most valuable examples had already been shipped abroad. The thousands that remained were marked for destruction, turning airfields across Europe into vast scrapyards between 1945 and 1948. The directive was simple. Every German aircraft, fighters, bombers, transports, trainers, and prototypes had to be eliminated unless reserved for research. Bases such as Flensburg, Lübeck, Blankensee, Grove, and Tarnowitz became disposal hubs where Allied crews stripped and crushed airframes, feeding metal back into Europe's rebuilding industries. At Grove, rows of fighters were dismantled. In northern Germany, British teams destroyed intact bombers that had survived the war. Even late-war jets were broken down unless already assigned to test programs. Some aircraft were burned in pits or loaded onto barges and sunk along the coast. Many of these underwater wrecks still lie where they fell, occasionally rediscovered by divers. The work was methodical. Wings were separated from fuselages, engines were removed, instruments were salvaged or destroyed. Aluminum and steel were sorted for recycling. What had once been symbols of technological prowess became raw material for reconstruction. Civilian aviation also faced restrictions. Aircraft such as the Junkers Ju-52, which had both military and commercial uses, were reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Some were converted for limited transport services, but many were still scrapped for consistency with Allied policy. In Czechoslovakia, captured aircraft transitioned briefly into service under new designations before the majority were retired and dismantled. France, which operated several German types for training and testing, eventually phased them out as spare parts ran low and maintenance challenges increased. Historians still debate whether more aircraft could have been preserved. Several researchers argue that many historically unique airframes were lost during this period simply because no museums or archives had space to store them. Others note that Allied priorities focused on demilitarization, not preservation, and that the political desire to dismantle Germany's war machine outweighed concerns about historical value. The limited number of surviving Luftwaffe aircraft today is a direct result of this disposal phase. Economic factors also shaped the destruction process. Metal shortages across Europe meant that aluminum and steel from Luftwaffe aircraft were valuable resources. Recycling airframes helped supply industries producing consumer goods, infrastructure materials, and machinery essential for recovery. For many local workers, scrapping aircraft provided stable employment during a challenging transition period. By 1948, the vast majority of Luftwaffe aircraft no longer existed. The runways that once hosted major fighter units and bomber groups were cleared or repurposed. Some became training grounds for Allied occupation forces, others reverted to farmland or became civilian airports. Even as most Luftwaffe aircraft were dismantled after 1945, a smaller number entered a second life under foreign flags. From 1946 onward, several countries operated German-designed aircraft out of necessity, availability, or technical interest. These fleets were often short-lived, but they played an important role in early post-war aviation. Czechoslovakia became one of the first nations to repurpose German equipment. Factories in Prague, Kunovice, and Letňany held both completed aircraft and partially finished airframes, which engineers assembled into operational fighters. The most famous result was the Avia S-199. Built from Bf-109 airframes, but fitted with Junkers Umo 211 engines originally designed for bombers, the aircraft was difficult to fly. The engine's torque characteristics and the mismatched propeller made handling unpredictable. Yet the S-199 equipped the Czechoslovak Air Force until newer Soviet aircraft replaced it. Several were later sold to Israel, becoming the nation's first fighter aircraft in 1948, where they flew combat missions during the War of Independence, despite their challenging flight characteristics. Spain also extended the legacy of German fighters. Under license agreements dating back to the late 1930s, Spanish factories produced the Hispano Aviación HA-11-12, a modified Messerschmitt Bf-109 design with Spanish-made engines. Production continued into the 1950s. These aircraft served in the Spanish Air Force into the mid-1950s. Their most famous appearance came decades later when they were used to portray German fighters in films such as The Battle of Britain. Norway operated captured Bf-109s and Arado R-96 trainers during its early post-war rebuilding period. Part shortages eventually grounded these planes, but several airframes survived long enough for restoration efforts in the 1960s and 1970s. Civil aviation also benefited indirectly from surviving German technology. The Junkers Ju-52 transitioned into passenger service in several countries. In France, the Toucan variant was produced at the Amiot factories and used in colonial transport roles. Lufthansa briefly operated Ju-52s in the early 1950s before shifting to modern-built aircraft. By the time West Germany established the Bundesluftwaffe in 1956, none of the old Luftwaffe aircraft were considered for operational use. The new Air Force relied on Allied-built designs such as the F-84 Thunderstreak, Canadair Sabre, and later the F-104 Starfighter. German aviation culture had moved into the jet age, leaving wartime designs behind. Efforts to preserve surviving airframes grew in the second half of the 20th century. Many of today's museum pieces come from crash sites, remote lakes, or long-buried wrecks from the Eastern Front. Restorers often had to combine parts from multiple aircraft to create a single display model. In the modern era, only a small number of intact Luftwaffe aircraft still exist. Examples of the Me-262, Bf-109, FW-190, and Arado R-234 sit in museums from Washington to Berlin, while a few privately built replicas fly at air shows. Almost all original wartime airframes remain grounded. What survives today is only a fragment of the vast force once spread across Europe, silent reminders of how quickly even the most advanced machines can disappear, and how the post-war world reshaped the legacy of German aviation. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.